The morning mist clung to the floating gardens of Meridia, pearls of dew trembling on translucent leaves as the first rays of sunlight pierced the clouds. Nerissa moved silently among the water lilies, her blue skin shimmering with subtle patterns that betrayed her emotions to any who knew how to read them. Unlike other aquari whose azure complexions rippled with controlled purpose, Nerissa's illuminations came unbidden, betraying feelings she couldn't express through the water speech of her people. "Look at her," whispered Farron, his cobalt features flowing with deliberate patterns of mockery as he manipulated a small sphere of water between his webbed fingers. "The dry one pretends she belongs among us." His companion Nices chuckled, her own aquamarine skin poolsing with amusement as she twirled elegant streams of water around her wrists, casual magic as natural to them as breathing. How can she call herself aquari when she cannot even lift a droplet? Nerissa's skin darkened to indigo with shame, but she continued her work, arranging the floating flower beds with practiced precision. Born without the innate ability to manipulate water, the defining trait of her species, she had long endured such whispers. The gardens were her sanctuary, the one place her artistic hands were valued, if barely tolerated. In the central atrium of Meridia, the vast bubble domes glistened as sunlight refracted through their watery membranes. The floating city-state hovered above the endless ocean, sustained by ancient magic and the collective waterworking of its inhabitants. Today, unusual activity disrupted its tranquil rhythm as the council prepared to receive visitors from the volcanic Emberforge Islands, their first diplomatic contact in generations. "All must be perfect," declared Councillor Thelian, his deep blue skin projecting formal patterns of authority that made the water around him vibrate subtly. "The Emberkin delegation must witness the superior harmony of Aquari society." Nerissa's position in the welcoming procession was deliberately marginal, positioned behind a large ornamental fountain where she would remain mostly hidden from view. Still, she found herself curious about these beings who commanded fire instead of water. Perhaps they might understand what it meant to be different. The Emberkin arrived in a vessel of burnished copper and obsidian that hovered without touching the water, an affront to Aquari sensibilities, but a necessity for people whose very essence was antithetical to submersion. The delegation emerged cautiously, their red-skinned bodies emanating controlled heat that created a subtle steam where they walked along the moisture-rich pathways. Leading them was Ambassador Soltaz, his crimson skin accented with swirling golden patterns that shimmered like lava flows. Behind him marched 6 guards in ceremonial armor that gleamed like polished ruby, and finally, a slender figure whose presence immediately caught Nerissa's attention. Unlike the others whose red skin burned bright as the setting sun, this Emberkin's complexion was muted, more akin to smoldering embers than raging flame. His movements lacked the aggressive confidence of his companions, yet possessed a deliberate grace that reminded Nerissa of her own careful gestures. "I present Terk, cultural attaché and nephew to Empress Ignara," announced Ambassador Soltaz, his voice crackling like a hearth fire. Councillor Thelian manipulated an elaborate water formation in formal greeting, the liquid twisting into complex symbols of welcome that hung suspended between them. Ambassador Soltaz responded with a controlled flame display that mirrored the shapes without threatening the water constructs, a careful balance of opposing elements. Throughout the ceremony, Terk's attention drifted repeatedly to the margins, where his amber eyes found Nerissa partially concealed behind the fountain. Unlike the other Aquari whose hands constantly shaped and directed water, hers remained still, clasped before her as she observed the proceedings with quiet intensity. When a young Aquari messenger accidentally bumped into her, causing Nerissa to step forward into view, the nearby Aquari recoiled subtly, creating a visible space around her. Terk noticed immediately how her skin flushed deeper blue with embarrassment while her hands made quick, elegant gestures that seemed to communicate something, though not in any language he recognized. "Who is that one?" he asked quietly, nodding toward Nerissa. His guide, a minor Aquari official named Marin, followed his gaze with obvious discomfort. "That is merely Nerissa, a garden tender. She is incomplete, born without water speech or manipulation. She should not have been visible during the ceremony." "Does she not speak at all?" Terk asked, his interest visibly unsettling his guide. "Not as proper Aquari do," Marin replied, his skin rippling with dismissive patterns. She uses crude hand gestures instead of water shaping to communicate. Most don't bother to learn her primitive signals. The diplomatic procession continued through Meridia's floating gardens, Nerissa's domain, where both delegations paused to admire the intricate arrangements of aquatic flora. Here, at least, Nerissa stepped forward with professional confidence, directing attention to rare specimens with graceful hand movements. When one particularly spectacular blossom unfurled at her approach, Ambassador Solthas expressed admiration. "Your underwater gardens are renowned across the 9 seas, but I had not expected such artistry." Counselor Thelian's skin pulsated with proprietary pride. Yes, despite her limitations, the girl has some use in tending these simpler life forms. Terk frowned at this casual cruelty. When the group moved ahead, he deliberately slowed his pace, letting the procession pull ahead until he found himself momentarily alone with Nerissa in a small alcove of luminescent corals. "Your gardens are extraordinary," he said softly, unsure if she could understand spoken language. Nerissa looked up, startled that someone, an outsider no less, had addressed her directly. Her hands moved in graceful patterns, forming symbols that conveyed meaning through motion rather than magic. Terk shook his head apologetically. "I don't understand, but I'd like to learn." Surprising him, Nerissa picked up a fallen blossom and traced a pattern in the condensation on a nearby crystal surface. The crude pictograph depicted a stylized garden with a figure bowing in thanks. "You're welcome," Terk smiled, his ember-colored skin glowing slightly brighter, the Emberkin equivalent of a pleased blush. "I'm Terk." She nodded, then pointed to herself and slowly mouthed, "Nerissa," though no sound emerged. "Nerissa," he repeated, the name warming on his tongue. A sharp call from ahead interrupted their brief exchange. Ambassador Soltaz was beckoning impatiently, his skin flaring with barely contained annoyance. "I must go," Terk said reluctantly, "but perhaps we'll speak again, in our own way." As he hurried to rejoin his delegation, Terk glanced back to see Nerissa standing motionless among her floating gardens, her blue skin illuminated with a pattern he couldn't read, but somehow understood conveyed a loneliness as vast as the ocean below them, and perhaps a flicker of something he rarely encountered in diplomatic circles, genuine curiosity untainted by political calculation. That night, as Meridia's bioluminescent lamps cast their soft glow across the floating cityscape, two very different outsiders found themselves looking up at the same stars, wondering about languages unspoken and connections that might bridge worlds never meant to touch. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. 3 days into the diplomatic mission, Terk found excuses to visit the floating gardens with increasing frequency. The official reason, studying aquari botanical techniques that might benefit Emberforge's volcanic hothouses, satisfied his uncle's delegation. The truth was far simpler. He couldn't stop thinking about the blue-skinned gardener whose silent grace haunted his thoughts. Dawn found him wandering among the mist-covered lily pads, ostensibly cataloging specimen variations, but actually searching for a glimpse of indigo among the verdant growth. When Nerissa finally appeared, gliding between the floating plant beds, Terk's ember-colored skin brightened involuntarily, betraying his pleasure to anyone who understood Emberkin physiology. Fortunately, only Nerissa was present, and she greeted him with a subtle illumination pattern of her own, blue ripples that spread across her skin like ripples on water. Her hands moved in the graceful gestures of her personal language, a question in their motion. "I wanted to see you again," Terk admitted, though he knew she couldn't fully understand his words. From his satchel, he produced a small journal filled with sketches, his attempts to catalog her hand signs alongside their possible meanings. Nerissa's eyes widened, her skin pulsing with bright blue surprise as she examined his work. Carefully, she corrected several interpretations, guiding his hand to form the proper shapes. Each time their fingers touched, a curious purple light formed at the junction where red met blue, a phenomenon neither mentioned but both noticed with quickening pulses. After several minutes of this improvised lesson, Terk gathered his courage and attempted his first coherent sentence in her gesture language. "Garden beautiful like you," his clumsy hands formed, fingers struggling with the fluid motions that came naturally to her. Nerissa's skin darkened to a deep azure, the aquari equivalent of a blush. Her responsive gesture was simple but unmistakable, gratitude and pleased embarrassment. "I have something to show you," Terk said, then repeated the sentiment in gestures. Glancing around to ensure they remained unobserved, he extended his palm upward and concentrated. Where other Emberkin could conjure dancing flames with casual ease, Terk's effort produced only a small, stuttering ember that flickered weakly above his hand. "This is my shame," he signed slowly. "Weak fire, bad Emberkin." Understanding dawned in Nerissa's expression. With gentle deliberation, she reached toward his struggling flame, a gesture that would have been unthinkable between their species under normal circumstances. Instead of extinguishing his fire or recoiling from its heat, she moved her hands in the space around it, as though his flame were one of her water gardens needing tending. Terk watched in astonishment as his small ember stabilized, responding to her movements though she never touched it directly. Together, they created something new, his flame dancing to the rhythm of her gestures, forming patterns that spoke more eloquently than either could alone. "We same," she signed, pointing between them, "different from others." The revelation of their shared outsider status created an immediate bond. For the next hour, they developed a hybrid language, her hand gestures complemented by his small flame symbols, creating a communication system uniquely their own. "The delegation meetings are endless," Terk confided through their new language. "Ambassador Soltaz and your council trade pleasantries while avoiding the real issues." "What issues?" Nerissa asked, her signs precise and curious. "The Twilight Straits," he explained, using a flame symbol to represent the contested waters between their territories. "Both sides claim the mineral deposits there. It's why we're really here, to avoid conflict through negotiation." Their peaceful exchange was interrupted by approaching voices. Terk extinguished his flame immediately as Councillor Thelian rounded the corner, accompanied by Ambassador Soltaz. "Cultural attaché Terk," Thelian's voice carried the melodic lilt of water speech, though he spoke in the common tongue. "Your absence was noted at this morning's historical exchange." "My apologies, Councillor," Terk bowed respectfully. "I was researching aquari horticultural methods as authorized in our cultural exchange provisions." Ambassador Soltaz's crimson skin flared with suppressed irritation, the temperature around him rising noticeably. "With this particular gardener, is there some special knowledge she possesses?" Before Terk could answer, Nerissa's hands moved in quick, formal gestures directed at the counselor, likely an explanation or apology. Thelian's skin rippled with annoyance. "Cease your hand flailing, girl. It's unseemly before our guests." He turned to Soltaz. "You must excuse her crude communication. She was born defective, unable to perform water speech or manipulation." Terk's skin darkened with anger at the casual cruelty, but years of diplomatic training kept his voice even. "Actually, I find her methods fascinating. A language created without magic has significant cultural implications." "Hardly a language," Thelian dismissed with a condescending ripple pattern across his skin. "More like the pantomimes of lesser creatures. Now you are expected at the historical archives immediately. The tide waits for no one, as we say." As the two officials led him away, Terk glanced back at Nerissa, whose blue complexion had dimmed to a muted slate, a sign of resignation he was beginning to recognize. She signed something quick and small, meant only for him: "Tomorrow dawn." Throughout the remainder of the day, Terk endured tedious historical presentations on Aquarium-Birkin relations, most emphasizing ancient conflicts while glossing over periods of cooperation. His attention continually drifted to thoughts of Nerissa and their developing language. When Ambassador Soltaz demonstrated traditional Emberkin greeting flames, Terk executed his part adequately, though everyone noted the subdued nature of his fire manipulation. "My nephew shows unusual restraint," Soltaz explained smoothly to the Aquari observers. "His control is precise." The diplomatic euphemism for his weak flame abilities was familiar. Terk had heard variations his entire life. Even here, among people who feared fire, his inability to produce impressive flames marked him as lesser. That evening, during the formal dinner held in a pressurized chamber comfortable for both species, Terk noticed servants deliberately keeping Nerissa away from the proceedings. She worked in adjacent gardens, visible but excluded, arranging spectacular aquatic flower displays that everyone admired without acknowledging their creator. "The girl with the blue skin, Nerissa, why is she treated so differently?" Terk asked Marin, who had become his regular guide. Marin's skin flickered with discomfort. Her condition is believed to be potentially contagious. Some fear prolonged exposure might weaken another aquari's connection to water. That's ridiculous, Terk said, perhaps too forcefully. Magical abilities don't spread like disease. Perhaps among Imberkin, Marin replied diplomatically. Our ways are different. Later that night, unable to sleep in his water-surrounded quarters, specially designed with air pockets to accommodate the Imberkin delegation, Terk slipped out for a walk. Meridia at night was eerily beautiful, bioluminescent algae illuminating the transparent walkways, while moonlight filtered through the great bubble domes overhead. His wandering feet inevitably led him back to the gardens. He didn't expect to find Nerissa there at this late hour, but some impulse drew him nonetheless. To his surprise, a soft blue glow emanated from behind a cluster of tall reeds. Nerissa sat alone on a floating platform, her hands moving through what appeared to be exercises, practicing complicated signs with intense concentration. When she noticed him, her initial startle gave way to cautious pleasure, her skin brightening with welcome. I couldn't sleep, Terk signed, his movements becoming more natural with practice. Never sleep well, she responded with a rueful expression. Too much thinking. He settled beside her on the platform, careful to maintain a respectful distance while still close enough to see her signs clearly in the dim light. What thinking about? Her response was a complex series of gestures that outstripped his limited vocabulary. Seeing his confusion, she simplified, My place, where I belong. Terk nodded with profound understanding. I ask same question always. For a moment they sat in companionable silence, the only sound the gentle lapping of water against the garden platforms. Then, hesitantly, Terk extended his palm and created his small flame again. Together, he asked. Nerissa's eyes reflected the golden light as she nodded, her hands rising to dance around his fire. As before, something magical happened when they combined their abilities. His ember grew more stable, responding to her movements as though they were connected by invisible threads. Experimenting, Terk shaped his flame into a simple bird form will. Meridia transformed over the next 3 days as preparations for the annual Celestial Festival reached their climax. Floating lanterns shaped like stars drifted through the bubble domes, their soft luminescence complementing the natural bioluminescence of Aquari architecture. Banners of liquid crystal flowed in hypnotic patterns, manipulated by water shapers whose blue hands conducted this fluid symphony with practiced precision. For Terk, each moment not consumed by diplomatic duties was spent seeking glimpses of Nerissa. Their dawn meetings had become a cherished ritual. Brief exchanges of their hybrid language before their respective worlds reclaimed them for the day. These stolen moments felt increasingly precious as rumors circulated that negotiations over the Twilight Straits were deteriorating. Ambassador Soltaz says we may depart earlier than planned, Terk signed to Nerissa as they knelt among the morning blooms. Council refuses compromise on eastern mineral deposits. Nerissa's skin dimmed to a troubled slate blue. Festival tonight, you must stay. I wish to, Terk replied, his small flame dancing between his fingers to emphasize his sincerity. But duty to Emberforge comes first. She nodded with reluctant understanding, then brightened as an idea struck her. Her hands moved animatedly. Festival has ancient water-binding ceremony. If you attend, diplomatic courtesy requires council grant one request. Hope kindled in Terk's chest. Request extension of mission. Her answering smile confirmed his interpretation. Their quiet exchange was interrupted by Farron's unwelcome arrival. The water shaper's cobalt skin pulsed with suspicious patterns as he regarded them. Cultural attaché, he acknowledged Terk with minimal courtesy before turning to Nerissa. His hands formed mocking approximations of her gestures while his water speech carried deliberate venom. Playing with fire now, silent one, how desperate for attention. Terk straightened, his diplomatic reserve cracking. You address a cultural representative of Emberforge and the personal gardener to your council. Farron's skin flickered with surprise at this defense, but he recovered quickly. Merely expressing concern for proper protocols, the defective one has duties to prepare for tonight's ceremony. His smile turned cruel as he added, the council has selected her for a special role this evening. After Farron departed with a smug ripple of his water speech, Nerissa's hands trembled slightly as she signed. Something wrong, never included in ceremony before. Perhaps recognition of your garden work, Terk suggested hopefully, though dread pooled in his stomach. She shook her head unconvinced. Be careful tonight, watch for signal. Throughout the day, excitement built across Meridia as three rare celestial phenomena converged. The alignment of twin moons with the abyssal star, an event occurring only once every 68 years. According to Aquari tradition, this alignment strengthened their connection to water magic and offered enhanced abilities to those who performed the sacred rituals beneath its light. The Emberkin delegation was granted observer status at the ceremony, a gesture of unprecedented openness that Ambassador Soltas viewed with political calculation rather than cultural appreciation. Remember, he instructed Terk as they prepared in their quarters, observe keenly any vulnerabilities in their magic system. The Empress will want detailed reports. Terk nodded dutifully while his thoughts dwelled elsewhere. The small flame he maintained in private practice had grown incrementally stronger since his sessions with Nerissa, responding to techniques derived from her hand movements. This discovery remained his treasured secret. At sunset, the central atrium of Meridia opened its dome to the darkening sky, the protective water barrier thinning to perfect clarity while maintaining structural integrity. Beneath this sublime engineering feat, thousands of aquari gathered in concentric rings around a central pool elevated above the crowd. High Counselor Orlin, the most senior water speaker whose turquoise skin bore the complex patterns of 7 decades' wisdom, began the ceremony with a sonorous water speech that resonated through the gathering. Though Terk couldn't understand the magical language directly, the emotional resonance transcended words: reverence, anticipation, connection to ancient tradition. The Emberkin delegation was positioned on a special platform providing optimal views while keeping them safely distant from the water rituals that would follow. Terk scanned the crowd anxiously, searching for Nerissa among the sea of blue complexions. The ceremonial pool illuminated as the first moon crested the horizon, its light catching the vapor rising from the specially treated water. Young aquari chosen for their exceptional abilities approached in formation, their skin pulsing in synchronized patterns. The ascension ritual begins, whispered Marin, who had been assigned as translator. Those with the strongest connection to water will create shapes representing our history and future hopes. One by one, talented water shapers demonstrated their prowess, lifting elaborate formations from the pool. Ships sailing across ancient seas, creatures of the deep, the founding of Meridia itself. Each display earned appreciative harmonic hums from the audience that vibrated pleasantly even in Terk's non-aquari chest. Then came the disruption that sent ripples of confusion through the gathering. We have a special participant tonight, announced Counselor Thelian, his skin projecting patterns Terk had come to recognize as false benevolence. One who reminds us of the importance of our gifts by her absence of them. 4 attendants escorted Nerissa to the central pool, her skin muted with apprehension. The crowd's reaction was immediate. Murmurs and ripples of discomfort spread as she was positioned before the sacred waters. What's happening? Terk demanded of Marin, unable to hide his concern. The guide shifted uncomfortably. It's unusual. They appear to be using her as a demonstration of contrast to show what it means to be without water speech. You mean to humiliate her? Terk hissed, his skin temperature rising dangerously. On the central platform, Thelian continued with ceremonial solemnity. Let us witness what becomes of those disconnected from our blessed heritage. Nerissa approached the celestial waters. With quiet dignity that twisted Terk's heart, Nerissa stepped forward. The expectant hush that fell over the assembly carried cruel anticipation. They had come to witness failure, not celebration. Now shape the water to honor our ancestors, Thelian commanded, knowing full well the impossibility of his demand. Nerissa stood before the pool, her hands hovering over the shimmering surface. For a breathless moment, nothing happened, exactly as the council had planned. Whispers grew as her fingers moved in her personal language, eloquent but powerless to affect the sacred liquid. From where Terk stood, he could see her skin darken with humiliation, though her face remained composed. Her eyes found his across the gathering, and in that moment something passed between them, a silent communication deeper than their practiced signs. Without conscious decision, Terk stepped forward. Ambassador Soltas grasped his arm in warning, but he pulled free, moving purposefully toward the central platform. "What are you doing?" hissed the ambassador, real fear edging his anger. "Diplomatic courtesy," Terk replied calmly, "to participate in cultural exchange." A stunned silence fell as the red-skinned Emberkin approached the sacred pool, breaking every protocol established for the event. Councillor Thelian's skin pulsated with alarm and outrage. "Cultural attaché Terk, this portion of the ceremony is not open to outside participation." Terk bowed respectfully but continued forward until he stood beside Nerissa. According to the Treaty of Mutual Understanding, signed just yesterday, cultural representatives may participate in non-militarized expressions of heritage when invited by a native practitioner. He gestured to Nerissa, whose wide eyes reflected the twin moonlight. "I have been so invited." It was a technicality at best, an outright fabrication at worst, but the public nature of the gathering prevented immediate contradiction without diplomatic incident. Standing beside Nerissa, Terk whispered, "Together." The smallest nod was her only response as her hands rose once more above the water. Terk extended his palms and summoned his modest flame, which flickered to life between them. What happened next astonished everyone present, including the participants themselves. As Nerissa's hands moved in her fluid language, Terk's flame responded, growing and shaping itself to her gestures. When her fingers traced patterns above the pool's surface, his fire followed, creating glowing reflections in the water below. Though she couldn't manipulate the liquid directly, the combination of her movements and his flame created the illusion of the water responding, fire and reflection dancing together in perfect harmony. A collective gasp rose from the assembly as the twin moons reached perfect alignment overhead, their combined light catching the fire dance and transforming it into something magical. Where Nerissa's blue skin and Terk's ember complexion came close, not quite touching but aligned in purpose, that mysterious purple light appeared again, stronger than ever before, casting violet reflections across the water's surface. Without planning or rehearsal, they moved through an improvised performance that spoke of two worlds, separate yet interconnected. His flame formed fiery figures that her gestures directed in a graceful narrative showing neither Aquari nor Emberkin history, but something older, something shared that few remembered. Young Aquari at the gathering's edges watched in fascination, some tentatively mimicking Nerissa's hand movements with open wonder. Older water shapers observed with expressions ranging from outrage to reluctant admiration as the display grew more elaborate, defying their expectations of failure. When the final movement concluded, Nerissa's hands guiding Terk's flame into a spiral,